intercept.com. And as soon as you get this done, we will turn on our intercept and we will register the account. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to send this to Repeater, and over here is where we'll work on escalating the privileges to an admin. So we'll send this, and just to get a response to see what we have here. So our role is a customer, and this tells us that we're going to need to change the role. And so I actually just did this a few hours ago. I was just working through the application, and I'm going to show you exactly what happened to me, because this will give you a really good idea of just the trial and error that we go through when we're testing applications. So I came in here, I typed in role just like this, and I typed in admin. And if you send it, since this user's already been created over here, we're actually going to have to change this to 1. And if we send it, we can see we've now created another user, but the role is still customer. And so I changed this to administrator, and it still didn't work. So I tried to change this to user admin, and then change this over here again, and we are still a customer. And I've tried user, I tried admin, I tried administrator, and finally what happened was I deleted this and I came up here and I tried to just move our input to see if that would make a difference. And I typed in admin just the same as before, and that looks good. And we'll change this to a 3, and then we will send it. And now you can see our role is now admin. So we have created an admin user. So if you take this user with this password that you just made, you can log in and browse the Juice Shop application as an admin. And so you'll actually see things like this in the wild. They're uncommon. You can actually go on HackerOne and read the hacktivity and see where people have actually got this to work. And you can see, just read the articles and read the submissions to observe how people have pulled this off. Some of them are going to be more complicated than this, but some of them really will be this simple. Okay, what I need you guys to do for this next lesson is go ahead and open up a new tab, and up here we're going to go to Portswigger, and you can go ahead and search for it. It should be the first one, and we're going to open it up, and we're going to move over to the login button. I've already created an account, and so go ahead, click on login, create an account. We're going to need it, especially in the coming lesson. So go ahead, click the login button, make an account, and I'll see you once you're logged in. Okay, once you have reached your login page, go ahead and click on Academy, and then go to All Labs. And once this loads, we're going to go ahead and scroll down until you find Business Logic, and I believe it's pretty far down in all of these labs. And so scroll down to our Business Logic errors, vulnerabilities right here, and we're going to be working through these right here. And so let's continue going forward. So these actually say solve because I already made the videos for these, and I realized that I never actually explained how you guys should get here and get to these labs before I started filming these videos. So I'm going to edit the video, and these are going to turn into unsolved. Okay, we are going to look at a few business logic vulnerabilities. And so these are very similar to the IDORs that we have been looking at. And so we're going to go ahead and just start here with this one right at the top. So you can go ahead and click on it. and we can look and see what exactly they have for us. And it says that it doesn't validate user input, and we're to buy this lightweight jacket. So you can go ahead and open up the lab, and this is where it brings us. It said we needed to log in, so we will go ahead and do that. And it gave us the login credentials, so we'll log in. And now we are supposed to buy this jacket. So I guess we can go ahead and view the details and add it to the cart. Let's actually come in here, turn the intercept on. We'll add it to the cart, and it tells us our price right here. I don't know exactly how much we're allowed to spend, but I think we should be able to. Let's see if we can make this a negative number. And we'll go ahead and forward that, and then we'll just turn that off. And it did not add it to our cart. We have $100 to spend on this jacket, and this jacket is way over $100, $1,300. So we'll go ahead and see if we can turn the intercept on, add this to cart, and let's just change our price here and see if that works. Okay, we're allowed to add it to our cart. So we have no need to apply a coupon, and we should be able to place our order. And it says we have solved the challenge. So things like this and business logic errors, iDoors and business logic errors, they're going to be things that you have the opportunity to find. These are pretty common that you'll find these business logic vulnerabilities. They happen when developers get lazy or they're just not really paying attention to what they're doing. I've actually seen really advanced developers make very simple mistakes that made their web applications vulnerable just because they weren't paying attention. And so you can find these. They're pretty common. I know there's at least one bug bounty hunter that this is all they do. They look through Burp, they look for business logic errors and what they can change just to find stuff that they shouldn't be able to. And vulnerabilities, these are pretty simple, and they do take a long time to find, but you can find them just by doing really simple things, by just changing numbers and inputs. Sometimes you will find stuff that has been encoded. It'll say, like, you'd have the lightweight jacket. Let's actually go back. I'll just show you. Sometimes we will add things to our cart like this, and you would have this, it'd say price, and it would look like this instead. We'll encode it, base64. You'd have this sitting inside your price instead of that number. And so what you have to do, if you see something like this, you'd have to take this and you'd come to your decoder, or you can go to CyberChef and you can put it in and try and decode the price. Rarely going to see it where it's just a plain number, but this is way more common that you would just see a number here and that you would have to decode it. Sometimes these prices will be stored in places other than just something plain and simple like this. And so it's something that you're going to have to look for and poke around. They do take a while to find, but you can find them right off as a beginner who knows very little. And we're going to look at one more, and then I want to send you off on a challenge and see if you can find a business logic error on your own. Okay, we are going to continue with the business logic vulnerabilities. We're going to go ahead and open up the second one, and after this one I'm going to set you loose on a challenge. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and open this up. It looks like the same as the one before. We need to buy this jacket, and we have our login user right here. So we'll go ahead and log in, and we'll try and proceed with buying the jacket. Okay, here's our jacket. So we'll go ahead and view details. We'll add it to the cart. We're going to do the exact same thing we did in the last one, and I'm going to do it the exact same way by starting out. Oh, we don't have a price. So we got our product ID, our product, and here's our value. Let's get 2 of them. And I'm assuming we have the same amount of money in our card as we had the last time to spend. So we'll go ahead and just put the negative sign in front of the 2, and we'll see if it allows us to put in a negative number. And we were. So in our cart, if we go look at it, it says we have negative $2,600. That means they are going to pay us. See if it'll go down by using these buttons. It does. So you wouldn't even have had to have done this in Burp. You could have just come over here and click this button, and it means they're going to pay us this amount of money. So when we place our order, we're definitely going to be able to buy our jacket, and our store credit is going to increase. Our price is not allowed to be less than 0. At least they have that in place. So we'll go ahead and, okay, made our cart empty. We're gonna have to go back and put that back in our cart. So what I think we'll do is we'll add this to our cart as well. I'm not sure how many of these we're gonna have to add. We'll go ahead and add one in, so that way we can buy our jacket, because that is our challenge. We'll go ahead and make sure that's a negative. Forward, turn that off, and now we should have 2 negative items in our cart. It has to be above 0 but less than 100. So what we can do is we can just continue to subtract these. Oh, we'll add these. We'll go ahead and add these until we hit our price. Okay, it went back to 0 and removed it from our cart. So we'll go back over here. Back over here. Let's find something a little more expensive so we don't have to add that so many times. We'll go with the pool. Come to Burp, turn our intercept on, and this is exactly how this would happen if you were testing it. It's just going to be a lot of trial and error. We're going to need, I'm going to guess, at least 15 of these. We'll just go ahead and add them to the cart. We don't need to intercept that. And go back to our cart, and there our total is now $76. So what we did is we just added 15 of these pools, which got us close to $1,500, and then $1,500. Then what we did is we went ahead and added our jacket in at a negative price because it wouldn't let us purchase anything at a negative number, and we only have $100 to spend, and so this should solve the challenge this time. So we'll go ahead and place our order. So I just wanted to add that you saw me make a lot of mistakes and a lot of trial and error in this video, and I want to thank you for being patient, but I also decided not to edit out all of the clicking that I had to do and the failures from this video, because I wanted you to see what it's realistically like as you test web applications, and as you're on the hunt, you will be doing what I just did the majority of your time, just trying to see if things work, and as they fail, you just go on and you try something new, and you try a different way to try and exploit the application or the vulnerability. And so I want to just encourage you that as you become frustrated or things aren't working, to just keep pushing on and see if you can find that vulnerability. Okay, it is time for your challenge. So if you navigate over to Juice Shop and get it running, what I want you to do is try and solve the challenge to where you actually are being paid $200 or $300 or $400 or more from this application. We just worked through 2 labs that are similar to this. So you can go ahead and try and solve this challenge, and when it's done, you should get the green bar at the top of your screen that'll tell you that you have completed the challenge. So I want you to go ahead and pause this video and give that a try. Okay, how did that go? We're going to go ahead and walk through this in the same manner in which I would solve this. So go ahead and add something to your basket, and then we'll check our basket. And then at this point, what I would do is I'd go ahead and turn the intercept on and walk through the whole checkout process and see if there's anywhere that I am able to modify, and see if I can modify this in any way, shape, or form. And what I think I'm going to do is I don't actually want to walk through and have you watch me put all of that information in just to solve this challenge. So we'll go ahead and see if we can actually modify this before we get there. So it says we have basket ID of 5. We're buying product number 4. Let's see if it will let us do what we did in the previous challenge and put in a negative amount. So try 99, turn the intercept off. It says we were able to add those to our basket, and they're going to pay us. That didn't work. Okay, they're going to pay us if we do that. So we'll go ahead and we'll try that again. $100 wasn't enough, so we'll come back to our products. We'll add to our basket. I forgot to turn burp on. We'll add this to our basket. We'll forward. Here's our quantity. I wonder if the rest of our content's at the end of this string. Well, we have our quantity, so what we'll do is we'll type in negative, and we'll do 200 this time. And we'll forward that and go to our basket, and that's more like it. We're going to get paid $400. So what you do at this point. So for the next few minutes, I'm going to show you a little bit of a walkthrough and explain SQL injection from the Nodus website. And I don't want you to actually go there or try and do this walkthrough. We're going to have plenty of practice when I have you create an account with PortSwigger and we walk through the PortSwigger SQL injection labs. And so for just the next few minutes, as we go through the Nodus example, and then I'm going to show you what the code actually looks like in a MySQL database. And I actually wrote a React app that's hooked up to a Node.js backend with MySQL as the database, so you can kind of see what the code looks like. Not that you need to memorize it, but it might help a little bit. Then we are going to move from there into PortSwigger and try to walk through the SQL injections together. So for the next few minutes, as I am on the Nodus website, just try and follow along and maybe catch a few nuggets of detail to understand. And then as I walk you through the actual back end of a SQL database, I hope that you can understand it and maybe even do a few of the PortSwigger walkthroughs with me, and then come back and then watch the MySQL database explanation again, and hopefully it will begin to click. This is one of those attacks that is really common, and so it's something that you should know. And up front, I'm just going to tell you, it might take you watching this and going through these labs several times to fully grasp the SQL injection, but that's okay. It takes time to become an ethical hacker. So with that, let's jump into it. Okay, we are going to begin working through some SQL injection. This is something that you can find. There are bug bounty hunters that dedicate their time only to looking for SQL injection. So if this is something that you find interesting, you can become really proficient at it, and this can be something that you primarily search for. So this is something I suggest learning, and learning well. It's easy to look for. You don't really need to know a whole lot about SQL databases in order to find these, but it does help. In the bug bounty world, it's actually a lot easier than if you find these on a capture the flag, because all you have to do is put in a time delay to have a proof of concept. But in a capture the flag, you'll have to know a little more than what we're going to go over here. But for the sake of not going through and learning how to program in SQL databases, I think it would take just too much time. And so we're going to go through how to find these if you were to start looking on bug bounty programs. And I went ahead and opened up Nodus 15. You don't have to go through this or work through this. I'm only going through this to show you what it's going to look like, and then we're going to actually go over to PortSwigger and we're going to work through their practice SQL injections. And so just to give you an idea of what we're doing, when you come to a login form such as this one of the best things you should do and you should regularly check for is just to put in a single quote, and then you would hit enter and see what happens. And it says this user does not exist. What we're looking for is an error in the query. So I would go and I would do a double quote next, and I would hit check existence. And if you can hit an error, this is what we're looking for. And I'll actually show you in Burp, because this is where you're probably going to be sending your request through. So you'll hit check existence. You would send this to your repeater. And I'm actually just going to go ahead and change this so you can see it. And then you would hit send. And it says we get an error in query. What we're going to see here in a little bit is we're going to see this be a 501, an internal service network error. And that's usually what you'll see. Start finding these, but you will find what is called a blind SQL injection. We're going to look at those a little bit later. So we still have the error. So what do we do with the error is we're going to start the enumeration process, but we're actually not going to do that here. I just wanted to show you kind of what we're looking for here so that you can look for it on your own in the first Portswigger lab and see what you can find if you can find it on your own. But just to give you a little more of an idea of what's going on in the background, the SQL database and the SQL language is going to look something like this. Select all from users. This will be where username equals, and this is what we input right here. So this would be our input. So what we did is we took this. This is what it'll look like. And this is what we can put in here. So you'd put your single quote or your double quote. And in the case of the Natus web application, what it has is something like this. And then here's where you're putting your query, where you're putting in to see if the username exists. And so when we put in another double quote, what happens is you break the query and this produces the error right here, because it doesn't need to be there, it shouldn't be there in order for this to work in programming. And so that's how you break it. Okay, what we're about to go over is going to be a little advanced, but I think it will help you visualize what's going on beyond more than what I just showed you in the last video. So what I have up is actually MySQL Workbench. We have here just a simple database username I was testing. Here's an actual username and password. This is what a table will look like. And so in our query, we have select all from users, which is our schema, and then the table, which is users, that's not capitalized letter here. And so this is what a table looks like, and what's going to happen is this is running on a server, and when we send a query to the back end of a web application, it will reach out to the server and see if our query is true. So I want to pause here because this is an update. I want to pause here and explain something a little better that I noticed I didn't do a very good job of. When you make a query to a database, the whole reason I wanted to show you the workbench is so that you could see these are the tables. So if I came over here and I said from select all from blog post, then we're going to be grabbing the tables from inside the blog post. And so when we look at this, select all from users, this is showing all the databases. So this is a database, this is a database, and we're selecting from this database right here, the users table. So the first one that we see right here, this is the database, and this is the table within the database. So select all from database and then table. This will be really helpful in the future when we learn to run SQL map and we need to know the context of SQL map. And so this is what it will look like, the code will look like. We have our database and we're querying our database, and we are selecting all from the users table where the username equals, and then you can just pretend this is blank because this is where our input is going to go in here. So we're selecting all users from the table where our input is at, and the password is equal to the other input. And so this makes sure that we have an actual username, and then it makes sure we have a password that matches our username and our password from our table. And so what this looks like is over here we have our login here, and if we type something in and we type in a password and we hit login, it's going to say wrong username / password. And so if we come in here and we actually have our actual login made, it'll say we are logged in. And so when we do a SQL injection. Basically what we're doing is sending in a request that we decide what it's going to be to the database, to the back end of the website that reaches out to our database server. So this is a pretty simple SQL injection that we're going to be covering here, and we're going to be going into union select statements after this video, which I think are more common than what we're about to go over. And so it's very important to learn the union select SQL injection statements. There are some bug bounty hunters that dedicate all of their time only to SQL injection. So I just made this, I'm shooting this video because I really want you to understand what's going on, and it'll make more sense. Don't worry if it doesn't make sense right now. You may have to come back to this video more than once and go over the union select statements labs on your own, and then come back to them after a day or two and just continue practicing them until you really have them down. And so one of the things that we're looking for when we do a SQL injection is, I'm going to inspect this so you can actually see this happen. We're going to have our console up, ignore my errors because my code is not perfect. When you put in a single quote, it will break this right here, and it will crash our server. So if we go ahead and throw that in, you see our connection is refused, and if you come over here you can see our application has crashed, which means I need to restart it. And now our application's running, and so when you send that, you'll have an internal server error, which is what we essentially just got right here. And so how we get past this is by actually giving it a statement that is true, so that it will give us back the first login in the database. It'll give us back the first username and password. And so we're going to make a true statement right now. And so what we'll do is we'll just throw in, it doesn't really matter, and then our single quote, and then we'll have or 1 equals 1, and then we comment out everything after that, and then our password doesn't matter either, and it says we're logged in. But if we just have this right here, it doesn't really, it'll tell us that we're not logged in because this isn't correct. So if we have this in here, what we're saying is this username right? Is this a true username? And the answer is no. You see we have wrong username and password. But 1 equals 1 is always true. And then we comment everything out after this statement with this hash, so our password doesn't work. So you see how this is all in one line of code? This is all getting ran together. It's making this query all together, and what we're doing is essentially commenting out everything after our username, so the password doesn't even matter. So when I say we comment something out, we're commenting out everything after our statement. And so we throw this hash in here, and everything after it's commented out, the password doesn't matter. I think we can get by with no password because I don't have it set up right now that you have to have any characters in here, and it will come back as true. And this is what I'm talking about when we say SQL statement and we're querying a database or a server. Okay, there is one other thing I really want to show us. We're going to go over this again, exactly what I'm showing you right now, in another couple of videos, but I think it'll be helpful to see it. So one other thing is, whenever you give it a database a true statement, it's going to come back without an error or saying it's a logged in. It's going to come back as true. So we just saw the statement that looked like this. We had our username, and then we had or 1 equals 1, and 1 equals 1 is always true, and so it comes back as logged in or it comes back as true. There are other things we can do to get information from a database. See, we want these username and passwords, and we have an ID. So we have 3 columns here that have information in them. Let's say we know the table is users, and we want to know how many columns we have. What we'll do is to pull down something true. If we want to pull down the number of columns because we don't actually know how many there are, and we want to just find out some information from this database, you can actually come in here just like we did before, put in our random username that doesn't really matter, and then this is what I mean when I say a union select statement. So we're going to connect union to our statement here. So we have select all from users where username equals these things, and then we're going to add to it. We want to add a union select, if I can spell, we're going to select null, and this will tell us, is there one column in our table? And we send this, we're going to crash the server. I'll go ahead and send it so you can see we crashed the server. I have to come over here, restart the server, and then I'm just going to give you, there's 3 columns. We know there are 3 columns, so we'll throw in null 2 more times, and this will say union select null null null, which is going to pull down how many columns there are. And if we send this, we got crash the server because we didn't comment out the rest of the string that we were querying. So here we go. We'll log in. Now we have no undefined came back, which means we have no errors. So we'd know there are 3 columns. And so this is going to come up in one of our very first SQL injections that we're going to be doing on the Portswigger web application. And there are labs that they have set up for us to practice on, and you feel free to continue practicing in there, but this is something we're going to be doing, and we're going to be going in a lot more detail, and you'll have to pay attention to this comment because it will change between 2 dashes without the semicolon based on the type of database that we're using. So I do apologize if this seems confusing. Hopefully it becomes more clear. It's in the top 10 most common vulnerabilities. I think it's in the top 5 most common vulnerabilities. Looking a little difficult right now because you've never seen it before. But by the end of this module in the course, if it's still unclear, you can go back and try it again and go back through this module, and it will become more clear, and you will memorize how to find these vulnerabilities. So with that, I will see you in the next video. Okay, we are here on portswigger.net. You can go ahead, I actually went ahead and logged in and created a new account. You can come in here and you can come up here, click sign in, and then create a new account. And then once you've done that, come back to the website and you will go to Academy. You can go ahead and click that and it'll load up, and then you'll go to all labs. This will take us to some of the labs we're going to be working through and the SQL injection. If you are having a hard time finding this exact URL right here, I will put a link to it in the description, or you can just type this out in order to get to all the labs. There's a whole bunch of them. We're not going to be going through all of them because some of them get kind of repetitive, and it has been a while since I have done these, at least a year. And so I actually thought what would be good, I'm not going to rehash any of these before we go through them, so you are going to see me make mistakes and you'll get to see my thought process, and you'll kind of just get to see how I work through these. And so if you want, you can go ahead and open up the first one. And then I like to open it up in a second tab over here. And they'll give you some instructions and kind of tell you what you're looking for here. They'll actually tell you where to find some of the SQL injections so you don't have to spend your time clicking through the whole web application and trying to figure out where things are. And so they kind of point you in the right direction. And so we're looking for a SQL injection with the union attack. And so what this looks like, let's open this back up. So this is what their side of the query looks like. And then we would be typing in, you would close it off. In our case, it's going to be a single quote, union select, and then we're going to be looking for the number of columns and what we can find within this vulnerability. So we come over here and it says find the number of columns returned by the query. And there's a couple of ways to do this. I think I'll show you both. I think they both work in this program, and you can decide what works best for you. So you can come in here, and I actually want to first give you a chance. I'll show you kind of what we're looking for and see if you can find it on your own. So you can come in here, send one of these to your repeater and see if you can find the SQL injection without any help. And it's okay if you haven't. We really haven't covered this a whole lot, but in the coming videos, we'll be able to do this multiple times over and over. And so you'll get the hang of what we're going through and what we're looking for. Okay, I'm going to send this to the repeater. I'm not actually sure where the SQL injection is even at. I think we'll try right here. Okay, that's what we're looking for. It is going to be right here. And so we're looking for this right here. This is what I was talking about in the last video, the internal server error. If you can produce this error, what you should immediately be thinking is there's going to be a SQL injection here somewhere. It is here somewhere. You just have to figure out how to exploit it. Challenge actually tells us to do is we're looking for the number of columns returned. And so we're trying to figure out how many columns are on the specific table. And so if you think of an Excel spreadsheet, you have rows and then you have columns. And what we're trying to do is figure out how many columns exist on the table. And when you're doing a SQL injection, we're going to be looking for passwords as we go through the Portswigger program, but there are a lot of other things you can look for, and we're going to get to those and exactly how to find them. Even though you're never really going to pull down actual information on a bug bounty program, I wanted to walk through, as someone who doesn't know how to program in SQL, what to do if you come across a capture the flag and you're trying to find specific things such as usernames or flags or passwords. And so we'll get to that in the coming videos, but now we have produced this internal server error, and so we know we are looking for the number of columns using the union attack. So we have our single quote which breaks the query, and then we type in union, and because we are sending this request, we have to send a plus for the space. If you don't have the plus in there, and you actually put a space in, it will break what we're trying to send. So union, select, and then you put in here null, which is just nothing, and then you send it, and it comes back with nothing, and then you just hit comma, and then you put in null, and you'd send it, and it still sends us an error. So we put in null again, and we send it. And oh, what we forgot to do was you have to close out the rest of the query. So in here, we have to put a dash dash. So that comments out everything after our statement here. So, and then we'd come over here and we'd put in null again. And it still says we haven't found the number of columns. And so it hit on the number 3, it came back, okay, so this statement would be true. So when the statement is true, it'll send us back a response. And so we have our response, which means there are 1, 2, 3 columns inside this lab we're working on. And so as we come into the next one, we'll read the instructions and we'll work through it. What I would like for you to do is go ahead and open up the second lab and click access to the lab. And I want you to go in here and do exactly what we did last time and see if you can remember how to find the number of columns in a SQL table. So you can go ahead, you can open that up, see if you can find it, and then if you want to try and figure out how to find the columns containing text, you can Google around and see if you can figure it out. If not, we're going to work through it now, and you will have the opportunity to practice finding columns containing text, as well as continuing to find the number of columns in a table in the future. So this isn't your only chance to try and practice this on your own. Okay, if you were able to pull down the number of columns, then you have figured out or learned what we went through in the last lesson. But if not, we're going to go ahead and work through this one again. So we'll come in here, click on one of these tabs, and we'll have a request sent, a get request, and then we will take it and send it to repeater, see if we can find an internal server error. Might not actually be in this one. Let's see. There it is. It's in this one. So we'll send this to repeater and put in our single quote. There is the error. So this is where our injection is going to be. And so if you weren't able to find it, you can go ahead and from here and see if you can solve the challenge and pull down the number of columns in this lab. So you can go ahead and give that a try now. What we do here, if you remember, is we type in union and our plus, then we select, and then we have our plus, and then we type in our first null value for the column, and then we comment everything else out after the request is sent. And it says we still have an error, and so we try this in. You actually don't have to have these in all caps. It's just kind of common practice for what people usually do is have things in all caps. I'm not really even sure why, so if you know why, you can go ahead and let me know. So we pulled this down, we found 1, 2, 3 columns, and so if you made it this far, good job, congratulations. You have learned how to pull down the number of columns, but now we're supposed to pull down which column has text or which ones take text. And so you would put in your single quotes, and then you put in a string and then send it. And that one came back as an error, so we'll try the next column. And it is the second column contains text, and we'll go ahead and try the final column as well. Whoops. Okay, so it would be the center column is the one we would go after to try and pull down information, which is not actually available in this lab, but it is going to be available in the coming labs. So in the next lab, I want you to try and go through this, find the category of where you're going to find your error, and then try and pull down union, select the number of columns, which column contains text, and then we'll work through how to actually pull down the information from that column. All right, I did not notice after I had closed the video that the lab still said it was unsolved. And for those of you that is bothered when a lab goes unsolved or you want to see them all solved, I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So we'll go ahead and I'll show you where to find that. If you want, you can go ahead and try and find it. I actually think this is a good challenge. I think you'll be able to find it. Just go ahead and go into perform the SQL injection, find the one that contains a string, and then look through the response and read through it and see if you can find the answer to solve the challenge. This here solves the challenge for you. So now the challenge is solved, and I will see you in the next lesson. Okay, we are back with the third SQL injection challenge. You can go ahead and click on it and read through the prompt. I'm actually going to give you the challenge to see if you can pull down which column or columns contain characters and will accept a string. And then I'm going to walk you through pulling down data from the table. And then I would suggest practicing, so after we go through it on this lab, to try and go through it again without the video before you move on to the next lesson, so that you can continue practicing things as you see it happening. So we'll go ahead and enter into the lab, and it's going to be pretty much the same. So if you want to go ahead now, I'm going to wait a few seconds and you can pause the video and see if you can complete the challenge and pull down which column or columns contain a string before we go ahead and continue learning how to enumerate the table columns. So by now this should be pretty familiar to you. We're going to come in here, we're going to look for our request that I apparently passed. We'll send this to repeater, We'll make sure that we get our internal server error, and then we'll try our union select attack and send it and see how many columns we pull down. So there's only 2 in this lab. And so what we'll do now is we're going to pull down information from the table. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Then I'm going to give an explanation of the best way, if you don't know any SQL or you don't know how to write any SQL statements, how to find table names if you find this in a capture the flag and you don't want to go through the long process of trying to figure out the table names through writing SQL statements. But before we get there, I'm going to show you, this is what we'll do. We have 2 columns. You'll see, check to see if they'll accept a string, and that one does. I'm going to go ahead and leave it, and that one does as well. That means both these columns have information within them. And let's say there was a 3rd column. If we were to write our SQL statement, we would have to include all 3 columns because the query has to be considered true. You would just leave the null statement in here. And we're going to see some of these in the coming videos. And just to give you an idea that you can go ahead and try and do these, you would do null plus the username. See, this is what you have to do. You'd leave this as an empty column. But in our case, we don't have 3 columns. So we're going to just go with the ones that we do have and the ones that will accept a string. And so we're going to pull down usernames, and then we're also going to look for the passwords in the table. So we will look for the password, and this should pull down for us the username and the password from the users table. And see, this looks like a user, this looks like a password, this looks like a user, this looks like a password, and this would be the administrator, this would be his password. So in our response, we have pulled down the usernames and the passwords that are within the table, and this would give us access. If we wanted to, you could log in as these people. If this was a real website, you would have access to their accounts. You can go ahead and turn your proxy off so that the web page loads, and then you will have the usernames here and the passwords, and you can come over to log in and you can give them a try and see if you're able to log in and see if this solves the challenge. There, that one solved the challenge for us. So with that, I want you to go ahead and see if you can figure out the next challenge without any help. See how far you can get and if you can make it through. We are going to skip over this 4th lesson and we're going to jump into the 5th lesson. And you can go ahead and open this up and read through it. This time we're going to be in an Oracle database, and so we're going to be trying to pull down the version that it is running. And so with this tip, we can see there's a built-in table called dual. So they actually give us the table name this time for us to run through. And I think with what you've learned so far in the SQL injection cheat sheet, you should be able to figure out how to solve this challenge. So if you want to go ahead and pause the video now and try, you can go ahead and do that. If not, we're going to walk through the solution together. So we'll open up the page. We'll go ahead and turn our proxy on, and this should all be familiar to you by now. So we're sending that to repeater. We make sure that we get our internal server error, and then we move on just like we have before. So we type in union, select, and then we'll check for a single column. But if you remember, the table name we were told is called dual. And so we can send that, and we still have an error, so let's try for a second column, and we see that there are two tables or two columns and the table name of dual. So we'll come in here and make sure they can receive a string, and they can. So what we'll do now is we're looking for, if you remember, the version name. We're trying to pull down the version name inside the response. So we'll come back to burp, and since these can receive string, we type in here banner, and then if you remember from the previous lesson, if we have multiple columns that can receive a string and we're not actually going to use one, we have to leave it with null, so that way that column receives an input. We just don't want anything from it yet at this point. And then for Oracle, the way you pull down a version is V $, and then just the word version. And we'll see if that sends it for us. I saw this change in the background to solved. So that gets us our information that we need. And so we should be able to scroll through here and we find it right in here. Okay, in this lesson we're going to go ahead and open up this one, the MySQL and Microsoft. I will just go ahead and tell you they are trying to pull a quick one on us, because instead of using the typical dash right here that we use in Microsoft to close out or to cancel or to comment out everything after your query, you will use a hashtag, and that will stump me. I will come across that and I can sometimes not figure out what's going on, and I can spend a significant amount of time trying to figure it out, and in the end I was using the wrong comment. And so that's one thing to be aware of. And in this lab, we're going to inject an attack. We're going to pull down the type and version of MySQL that's being used. And so this is very, very similar to the last one. And when you go ahead and open up the lab, we are looking to make the database retrieve the string. So I'm actually not entirely sure how to get this to say solved. So we're gonna be figuring this out together for, I guess, the first time. So I'm guessing what we're supposed to do is use our union select attack, pull down the response that we get right here, and try and find the version, which will look something like this, that it's using, and then go back and put it into a string, and it should give us the problem solved up here. So if you would like to go ahead and give this a try on your own, you can go ahead and do that, and I'll give you a few seconds and you can pause the video and then we'll walk through it together. We're going to continue the same way we have been. Turn on the proxy, pick a category, send it to repeater, turn the proxy off. I'm going to lower this so when it comes through as solved we can see it. We'll see if we get our error, and we do. Try it for null, and then don't forget the way we comment out is with the hash or the pound symbol. It has more than one column and it has two columns. So what we will do is we will make sure they can both receive a string, and they do. And so the way we pull down the version in Microsoft MySQL is a little different than the way we did it with the Oracle one. We'll go with the two @, you type in version, and if you looked through the cheat sheet, you would know this is how you pull down the version for Microsoft. And so what we do is we type in null, because you have to have both columns filled, and then we'll send it. And we came back with a positive response, and so we'll look and see if we can, oh, it solved it for us. It already said solved. I thought we were going to have to find a version number and send it through as a string right here. Okay, at this point, things are going to become progressively more difficult in pulling down usernames and passwords, especially once we get to the blind SQL injection, because this is something that we have not seen before. So we're going to be preparing for that by going into this lab right here. You can go ahead and open it up, and we are going to be pulling down the username and passwords, and we're going to log in as the administrator to solve this challenge. I think you can go ahead if you want and practice pulling down how many columns there are and which ones actually receive a string. And you can go ahead and pause and do that if you would like. If not, we're going to go ahead and solve it together. So we'll turn on the interceptor, and we're going to be seeing some new information that we haven't seen before. It's going to seem strange, but I'm going to do my best to explain exactly how the SQL statements work, the default tables, and what we're looking for. So we'll go ahead, send that to repeater, turn that off, send that, make sure we get our error, determine how many columns there are. String, and they do. So at this point, things are going to be a little bit different than what we've been doing. We're actually going to be trying to pull down some information from these tables. And so what we do, the first thing we have to do is figure out the table name. So if we have a grid like an Excel sheet, you have your columns that are going up and down, your rows that are going across, and the name of the table. The first thing we have to know is the table name in order to request the columns and then individual cells within the table for us to pull down that contain the usernames and the passwords. So we have our union select, and then we come in and we type in table name. And so this is what we're looking for. If you remember, we're replacing one of the null values with the table name. Then we leave the second one with the null value because we're not going to be pulling anything from it just yet. And then we go from the information schema. And this right here, the information schema dot tables, and this is a default table that you're going to have on every SQL database. So that's how I know this is there. If you were to go into SQL and you were to open it up, you're going to have several default tables, the information schema tables. This is default, it's always going to be there. And so this is how we know what to put in for our injection. Then we send it, and we have an error, which means I'm guessing I have a typo schema. There was my typo. And we pull down and we'll look through our response and pull down the table names that we have here, and there are a bunch of table names. But if you remember, the one we're looking for, we're trying to log in as the administrator, so we're going to need the users table right here. Users, this is the name of users table. I would suggest copying it and having a text file open because we're going to need this information. So now we're going to look for the column name. So we can delete this. So the table column is what we're looking for now. So we're going to, actually, I deleted the wrong part of the request. Instead of the table, we're looking for the column name. And we're going to leave this in the information schema dot columns. And this looks right. And now we're going to add to this because now we're looking for the columns from a very specific table. So now we add a plus and we'll say where the table name equals and then our users table that we just pulled down. So we'll type in table name, and then we do equals, and then our double quotes. I think I've actually already got that copied still. And then we paste in our users table. So what we have going on is our union select. So everything that's coming before this doesn't really matter. We're adding a query onto it. We're looking for the column name. We have our second value retrieving null because we're not looking for anything from it just yet, from the information schema, which is one of the defaults within the SQL database. And we found the table, so now we're looking for columns where the table name, so we're pulling down the table name, equals users. This is going to give us the columns within the table that is named users with some random characters. And so we should be able to send this. So now we should be able to scroll down, and we have column names. So the passwords column and the users column. And so now we should be able to change our query and pull down the passwords and the username. So I'm going to go ahead and copy these. We have the username and the password columns. These are the ones that we are interested in. And now we're going to change our union statement. So now instead of pulling down a column name, we are going to be looking for the username and the password. So we can delete our null and we can insert the password column, and here we'll put in the username column in the first slot instead of the column name, and we're looking for the username, the password. From users. Let's see if that works for us, and it does. So we should be able to come through now to solve the challenge. We have the administrator and another user, so we can copy the administrator. We can come back to our lab. Remember, to solve it, we have to log in as the administrator. We can paste in the administrator, and then we can come back to Burp and copy our password, and this should solve the challenge for us. Okay, now that was very, I don't want to say complicated, but it was a big jump from where we have been coming and where we've been coming from. And so as we get ready to go into blind SQL injections, it's going to become even more complicated. So you might have to go through this lab several times and make sure that you really understand what's happening. Make sure that everything that's built up to this point is working together. The next lab, I believe, is an Oracle lab. Okay, so you can try and solve this one. It's going to be similar to the one that we just did, only you can use the SQL cheat sheet. We'll go ahead and walk through it again just so we can have one more practice before we get into the blind SQL injections, because these are going to use everything we just learned in this lesson plus quite a bit more. We're going to be looking at new aspects within Burp and exactly how to use the intruder tool within the Burp program. So I think it's very important at this point, if I can stress it enough, we're going to have quite a bit of practice going into the blind SQL injection, but it's a lot more difficult than what we just went through if you've never done this before. So go through this again if you have to. Make sure you understand what's happening and what's going on. I want you to try and solve this lab completely on your own. I'm going to give you 2 clues before you start, but other than that, you have already learned everything necessary for solving this challenge. We'll go ahead and open up the lab, and if you remember, when we do go through an Oracle database, you have to use from dual when you're trying to pull down the number of columns within the table. And so since we're looking for we're going to have to log in as the administrator. That should give you a clue to at least how many columns are going to be within the table. And so the other clue I wanted to give you is if you go ahead and open up the SQL injection cheat sheet, when you pull this open, you are going to be using from all tables instead of information schema. So in the last lesson, we used information schema as our default. Well, that's not what we're going to be using this time. This time we're going to use all tables. Everything should be the same as it was last time. The only difference is we're going to be using all tables instead of information schema. And so you can go ahead with that information and try and solve this lab. And if you have gotten stuck, we're going to go ahead and walk through this together now. So the first thing is turn your interceptor on. We're going to go through the normal procedures here. We're going to send it to repeater, turn the intercept off, and make sure that we have our error appear, which we do. So this is telling us we have a SQL injection. We are going to pull down the number of columns. I know there's at least 2 because we were told that we have to log in as the administrator, which means there's at least a username and passwords column. So we have at least 2 of those. And then we'll go ahead and send this, and it comes back. So there are 2 columns. Both of these are going to have to retrieve a string in order for us to pull down a username and password. So I'll go ahead and check it anyway, but I know it's going to come through, and it does. Now this is where we are going to start practicing what we learned in the previous video. So if you remember, the first thing we have to do is find the table name. So we can go ahead and type in our table name, and this is from. Last time we used information schema, but if you remember, this time we're going to use all tables, and there we go. So this should give us all tables. If you remember, last time there was a bunch of them, but we are looking for the users. I'm guessing this is the one that we need. History. We're going to go ahead and pull down the information. Well, this is, we'll grab a couple of them just in case, but I think that's going to be the right one. So we'll keep this one. This is the one we're going to roll with. Now what we'll do is we'll have to come back up here, if you remember, and change. Now that we have the table name, we're going to go ahead and insert this and see if we can find the column name. So we'll change this to column, and we'll leave our null, and it is from. And this time we're going to input in our table into our injection. So we have from all of our tables, and we're looking for, at this point, the columns where it is equal, the table is equal to the table name that we just pulled down. So we have where, and then we'll type in our table name, and then equals our table name. And we'll go ahead, look this over, and then we'll send it. And it came through. Now we have to hope that we have our columns. So we have a password column pulled down, and we have the username. Okay, now we have to change our injection one more time. So this time we'll be getting rid of our null value, and we're going to be putting in first our username, and then we're also looking for the passwords, which will come from our second column, and this is going to come from our table name, which I actually think we delete this. We'll delete that, and we'll delete this. And we have an error, comma, and we have pulled it down. So this should have our usernames and our passwords in it, just like the last one that we walked through. Here's the administrator and the password. And so if you remember, we have to log in to actually receive the solved lab up here. So we'll go ahead, paste that, we'll copy and paste this and send it, and we have solved the challenge, and we are ready to start the blind SQL injection. We are going to go ahead and open up this lab. While it's loading, I thought I would just tell you this is going to be, the next couple of labs are going to be a little more difficult, and I think that you should practice them just to get this ingrained into your mind, what exactly is happening, because we're going to be adding quite a few new steps, but they actually let us skip what we have been practicing, because in the instructions they give us that we are going to be working with a table called users and two columns, usernames, or the username and passwords. So we don't have to go find the table and we don't have to find the columns, but we do have to still log in as the administrator to complete this lab. So you can go ahead and open up this lab, start this lab exactly how we normally would, by opening up one of these tabs, forwarding it, and then sending our request to the repeater, because what you're looking for is a request with this tracking ID. You need that tracking ID because that's where the SQL injection is going to be. So we'll send this, and you can send it a few times. And what I'm looking for is this content length. I want to make sure that it does not change. And sometimes you will send this on some web applications and it will change every time, no matter what you do, the exact same GET request. But for us, in our case, it stays the same, which makes this lab much easier to solve. And when you have this tracking ID, you can also check it as well for the SQL injection. And so you send it and you can see the content length has changed. So it's 4906, and you send it and now it has changed. This tells us there is a possibility of a SQL injection. So what we're looking for is what has actually changed in our response. Here, what I like to do when I come across a different response is to copy this and take it to a text editor. I think it's easier to read through and to look at, and I also can search, which we are going to do right here. So when it comes back without any modifications, we have the, let's send this again, we have the welcome back is on the page. When we put in our single quote to try and provoke an error, the welcome back is gone. So you can see we have 0 matches right here. And so with our 0 matches, we want to send a true statement to make sure that we can really add on to this query. So we go or 1 equals 1 and then comment this out. That comes back as true. So we know that we can give some kind of request and see what comes back true, what is actually true and is on the database will come back with this welcome back, which is what we're going to have to pay attention to. And so because we've already been told what the table name is and the column names, we can go ahead and start to look for information from this table. So we'll type in our usual union select, and this is where it changes, because we're going to now add a character into our query. So we're going union select from, and then we're going to go to our users table where the username is equal to, and then remember we were told we need to log in as administrator, so the username we're looking for, and we are going to send this and see if it comes back as true, and it does. So we have this, and now what we can do is we can actually add on to it, and we can look for the length of the password. And so you can come in here and you can look to see how long the password is, and you can pull down the length of the password, and you can come in here and you can go plus and plus length, and then we add in the password, and then you would add is it greater than, and then you can start right here and you can start sending to see is it greater than 1, is it greater than 2, is it greater than 3, and you can send this to the burp repeater and just continue seeing is it greater than and looking through this. What I am going to do is I'm actually going to skip this process for the sake of time, because we're going to have to go into a burp intruder and start looking for the actual password. And so what we're going to do is we're going to send this query over to the intruder and see what we can pull back. So I'm going to go ahead and take this query here, and what we're going to do is we're going to take this and we're going to add into it the characters that we're looking for. And so you would add in that you're looking for the first character and only one character inside the query, and then you're going to start with the character A. Now at this point, I'm sure if this is the first time you've ever seen anything like this, it looks very strange, and it is going to feel really strange doing things like this. It's new and it's kind of confusing, so we'll send this not to repeater, to intruder. And so we have this new string that we're sending. So we have our normal union select, and then we have a string from users where the username equals administrator. So we're looking on the table name users under the column username for the administrator's password, and we are looking for the actual password at this point. And this actually, I just noticed, we're not looking for the length of the password, we're going to be looking for the substring. So we'll come over to intruder, we'll look at our positions because we've already sent this over here. We'll clear where it wants us to start querying, and we are looking for the substring in the password. And so we will go ahead and set this up. What we do at this point is, as we set up our payload, you will add the whatever those symbols are to tell it this is where we want to shoot through, or we're going to use the cluster bomb. So this is where we're going to be going through and sorting to make sure we have the right characters. And then we'll add right here, because if you remember, this selects the first character, and then it's going to go through the first character for all of the characters that we give it. But then we want it to go through the second character as well, and then the third and the fourth and the fifth, until we reach the end and we have the password. I don't have the professional version of burp on this system, and so this is actually going to go really slow. And once it starts, I'm going to go ahead and pause the video so you don't have to wait for it to pull down the password, because it will actually take a while without the professional version of burp. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to set up our payloads. And so if you remember, payload 1 is going to go to this position, and payload 2 is going to go to this position. So the first payload, we're going through numbers. So we will find numbers, and we're going to go from 1, and this is when I guess it would have been helpful. I'm just going to go really far. This is when it would have been helpful to see how many characters were in the password, so you would have known how far you needed to go. And then we're going to go by a step of 1. So it's going to go up 1 character once it goes through all 30 characters. And then position 2, we are going to be going through the alphabet. See if it has the alphabets in here for us. I believe it does. Manually add these in, it would be a lot easier to go through these without having to do this, but I will edit this out. All right, I believe we have all of the characters added in. What we can do is we can go ahead and start the attack, and we can say okay. And now it is going to go through and start working through all of those characters. So position 1 and A, is position 2 and A, is position 3 and A, and it's going to go through and check every character for each position until one returns true. Okay, I have gone ahead and cut the video in the middle of where we were after starting the attack, and you can see that it's been running and we've pulled down some of the characters that we've needed. One of the things that might be helpful, if you copied exactly what I had typed into the payload or into the query right here, I actually had a error, and I had to go through and change that and fix it. And then that ran for a little while, and then also my computer fell asleep while running this, and it closed out my query, and so I had to restart it. And so this has been running for what feels like forever. And so I'm going to go ahead and we're going to stop it here, and I'm going to show you a little more manual way. And it's also a lot faster, because if you can see, it's sending one query each time to the server, and it's very slow, anywhere from 10 to 15 seconds. And it's because we've sent so many. And this is one of the things Burp does in order to get you to buy Burp Professional, so that it'll send them really fast. So they've throttled this down. But I'm going to show you a way that you can kind of get around this and send your queries a lot faster. Before we start that, I kind of wanted to show you our positions just in case it wasn't clear. Remember, in our query, we are selecting from the users, the table users, where the username is just the column, and we're looking for the name of administrator inside the password column. And so we're sending, this is the first character in the query. So this would be position number 1, and then it'll change, and it'll go position number 2, and then position number 3. And it will send A all the way through, however many we set those positions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, to see if an A comes back as true in any of those cases. And if it comes back true, we'll see something like this. You can see the length has changed and the welcome back is present in the response. And then once it goes to all of position 1 for all of the alphabet, it will go to B, and then it will start over, and it will continue, and it'll go through like that. This is a very automated way. We don't have to really do anything. We just set it up and let it run. But if you don't have Burp Professional, this can take a very long time. And one thing before we go ahead and I show you how to organize this to find the password is that in order to get this welcome back to show up, what you do is you can check in your response, and you can have your welcome down here. And if you can see these, it matches. The welcome has come back, which means it's true, and we have a match. For these down here, it is not true, and there is no match. And so we can sort out the true characters that exist and in which position they exist. So there's a G in position 2. There's a G in position 15, we have a K in position 8, and so on. And so we can know this is where there's characters, and this is how it's true. But in order to get this welcome up here, you have to go into your options. You will come down, so it'll start you up here. You'll scroll down to grep match. You will clear what's in here, and you will add welcome. You'll get a little pop-up. You'll just click OK, and then it will bring you back to your results, and it will look like this. And what you do is you just click this, and you click it again until we have the arrow facing down, and it will have all of the characters there for you as it runs. Now, the way I like to sort out the password is to have a text file open, which is right here. We have our text file. We'll delete this, and we'll delete this, and we'll paste this in. So what we have here, we'll also delete these, because these are just our query numbers on how many GET requests were sent to the server. And I think the less numbers we have, the easier this will be to understand. So this, if you remember, Let's open this back up and have our text file. This is the position from payload number 1, and this is the character that has come back in payload number 2. So what you would do, so let's say this is what we've brought back, and the query is finished, even though we know it's still running and it's going to take 5 more hours for it to finish running. So what we'd do is we'd have our password equals, and you'd come here and you'd go, okay, position number 1 is I, and then we'd look for 2. 2 is O. Position number 3 is a K, and then position number 4 is an I, and position number 5 L, and position 6 is a G, and then you'd go along and you would just continue doing this all the way through. So we go 6, and then we go 7, and then 8 is a C, 9 is N, and by the time you've gone through all of this, this is your password. And so we were told that the username is administrator and the password is what we're pulling down right here. And we'd come over here, we'd go to our lab, and this is where we would come in, we'd click log in, you would use administrator, and then this password that we have just pulled down. So if you want to let your intruder run forever, because it is really slow, especially once you get past about position, after you get past request number 30 to 35, it really slows down. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out. Okay, we are going to look at the blind SQL injection with time delays. So what you'll do is, if you find what you believe to be a SQL injection, you will inject a time delay, and they're pretty simple. But I also want to look at the cheat sheet because they're going to be different, and we're only going to be looking at this one right here. The blind SQL injection with time delays is really simple to the one with conditional responses, which we just looked at. The only difference is you would be running a case then statement, which if you're a programmer, it's like if then, and you're going to be saying if this is true, then sleep, and rather than if this is true. So with the cheat sheet, these are all going to be different. So you'll have to run this to get your program to sleep. For your delay with Microsoft, it's going to be like your syntax is going to look like this. For PostgreSQL is going to look like this, and MySQL is going to look like this. And so each one is going to be a little different, and you might have to just try each one and see what comes back for you. Okay, so this is, we're going to have to solve the lab, we need it to sleep for 10 seconds, which is kind of a long wait, but 10 seconds feels like forever when you're waiting for a response to a GET request. So we will go ahead and turn the interceptor on. Open this up. I think I clicked in the wrong spot. Oh, there's a tracking ID. We have one right there. And this will look, let's see if it says it's blind, so it's not going to have anything for us. I'm actually going to go ahead and go to an item so that I know I'm in the right spot. You guys don't have to watch me fumble around like you are right now. So we'll go ahead, send that to repeater, and the SQL injection that we're looking for with the time delay is the PostgreSQL right here. So what we'll do is we'll use this syntax right here, the PG sleep 10, and we're going to have to concatenate it to our query. So it's just 2 types, which is just above your enter key or your return key if you're on a Mac, and then you just type in the syntax exactly like you just saw, and then we don't forget to comment out the rest, and that should take 10 seconds for our response to come back. And once that response comes back, we should have a solved up here. And so the time delays are really simple, they're really easy to run, and this is how you do it. I'm not sure why that didn't come back as solved. Maybe we have to go ahead and forward this. There it is. There's the solved. So they're really simple to run. They're really easy proof of concept. You can change this to 5 seconds if you're impatient like I am, and wait just 5 seconds instead of 10, but you have to do 10 here to solve the lab. Okay, we are ready to start directory traversal. We have talked about this just a little bit earlier when we talked about navigating through files, and we talked about going through files such as this. So we would cd into the desktop and it changes us. We change into that directory. And so we're able to go between directories and go into different files. And the way we go backward, if you remember, if I wanted to go back to my home, I would just go back one directory and that takes me back. A good way to practice this, and maybe you've done this earlier, is to open up your home folder and just up here in your little search bar, you can practice going backwards, or you can practice going forwards. And so we would just be going forwards like this, and then we can go forward again and we can go into our desktop. And then if we wanted to go back, we would just do 2 dots and a slash. And so in directory traversal, we will be going through files only in our browser. So we would be going backward through here. And we talked about this a little bit in the previous lessons. And so we're going to go ahead and open up our Portswigger in our labs, and you can scroll down until you find the directory traversal. And then we're going to walk through a few of these manually, and then I'm going to show you a tool that does this for you. And I will pull up a directory traversal that is found on HackerOne, just so you can look at it and you can see just that these are not something that's lost out there and somebody's found them all. Actually, recently, I would say within the last 2 years, someone found a bunch of directory traversals. They were able to pull down files that they should have never had access to on the Department of Defense. And so if you would think of any organization that's going to have good security, you would think it would be the DoD. And these were found recently within the last 2 years, directory traversals on the DoD. And so it's out there and they happen. I've actually found a few of them, and we'll go through them manually, and then I'll show you a easy way to fuzz through with a tool that will actually pull down and tell you where a website is, or a web application is vulnerable, and exactly which exploit they used to prove it's vulnerable. So we'll do that after we go through some of these manually. Okay, we are ready to go ahead and open up our first lab. And you're going to be able to see just how easy these are to find manually, as I think they're really simple, and anyone can go and try these with really knowing very little about how the web application or locating files works in general. You can pretty much find these straight off your very first day. So we'll go ahead and access the lab and turn on our lab. And while that's opening, there's a few different ways to look for these. Probably the most common is going to be up here in your address bar. You'll come up here and this is where you'll search for them. And I'll just go ahead and show you. What you would do is you'd pull this open and you'd hit your slash and you'd go // and then you would hit enter and see if it can take you back any files. But it is not going to work for us in this bar. We're actually going to have to use burp for this. And so we'll go ahead and turn it on, turn our intercept on, and we'll view details. And so what I'm going to go ahead and do is send a few of these requests to Repeater, because I'm not actually sure where exactly we're going to find the traversal. So we'll go ahead and send that to Repeater as well. And I think that's it. So we'll go ahead and open this. And so if you remember how to go backward in our files, we'll actually start with the first one we sent. We'll go ahead and delete this. And so we're looking for the product ID, and you would go // and then what we're looking for, if you remember in the lab description, is the Etsy password. And so we just type in etc/password, and then you can send it. And it says we get a bad request. And so we'll go a couple more and see what happens. Okay, so we're getting a bad request. What we'll do is we'll go over to our other get request, and we'll go ahead and do the same thing. I like to go ahead and start out just like this, and then add to the path traversal as we go. And so I just go just like this and see how far we have to go before we can actually find the files. In this case, before we solve the lab. Okay, so there it solved it. So it goes back to the root folder, and then it goes forward into this file, and then it'll go forward into the password file, and it pulls down for us information that we should not be able to have access to. And so for us, this should solve the lab for us. So each one of these just goes back one file, and it goes back until it hits the root folder, and then it'll go forward into this directory, into this file. And that will give us information that we should not otherwise have access to. Okay, we are ready to go ahead and solve our second lab on path traversal. So you can go ahead, I think with what you have learned so far in the very first lab, you should be able to solve the second lab on the directory traversal. So if you want to go ahead and give it a try, you can open up the lab, which I've already done, and you will be looking for the same file we were looking for last time, the Etsy password file, and that will solve the lab for you. And so you can go ahead and pause the video now and see if you can solve this challenge. Okay, how did that go? Hopefully you were able to solve it without any trouble. If not, we're going to go ahead and walk through it now. We'll go ahead and turn on our interceptor, and we will click one of the view details just to make sure we can pull down the same get request we had last time, which was not the product ID. It was the image file name. So we'll go ahead and send that to Repeater. And while we're over here, we're going to start out just the same way we did last time. We're going to come in here and start with our Etsy password. And then as necessary, if we need to, we'll go ahead and add in the / slashes. But we always start at the beginning and go forward or go backward if necessary. So we'll go ahead and send this, and it came back on the first try. So hopefully you were able to solve that challenge, because they're going to get a little more challenging to do manually, but not all that difficult for us. Okay, we are ready for the third challenge that we're going to be looking at for the path traversal. And this one, we're actually told what's happened. So go ahead and open up this lab, and we'll see our instructions here. And we're told that the sequence is stripped away non-recursively. And so what we will have to do is modify the attack just a little bit, and pretty regularly, especially with cross-site scripting, you will see developers that know of a way or maybe a few ways that an attack can be performed. And so they'll just go ahead and strip out just specific elements or sequences within an attack or a payload so that they won't go through. But there's almost always another way to pull this off. And so actually in this lesson and the next one, we're going to be able to observe just how you change payloads. And really in bug bounty hunting, what you're going to be doing is a lot of trial and error until something works. And so we'll go ahead, open up this lab, and once you're in here, you will click View Details after you've turned on your intercept. We'll go ahead and turn that on. And my son would think this is the coolest toy ever. And so we'll go ahead and view the details. We'll get our GET request that we need right here. We'll send it to Repeater. We'll turn the intercept off. And once we're in here, we'll go ahead and we can start out with the Etsy password. And then we'll send this, and it comes back with a bad request. And so you can go ahead and try going back and it comes back with a bad request. And I actually know what is going on because we're told that the traversal sequence is stripped away. So what we'll have to do is try something different. And so what you can actually do is go 4 dots with 2 slashes. And then this is going to be a different process in pulling down the Etsy password file. So we'll send this, and then we will 1, 2, 3, 4 continue going, and we are able to find the file we need. Now when it comes to remembering all of these different ways that you can try and find a directory traversal, it is not necessary to try and remember these. I'm going to show you a tool that actually does all of this for you with hundreds and hundreds of different ways to pull down an Etsy password file. And so I'm just showing you manually how this works so that you know what's going on and you know how to find these. Just in case you're not allowed to run a scanning tool or anything like that on a specific web application. But you do not need to try and remember all of these different ways to pull down the Etsy password file, because you will have sources available that can do it for you or remind you exactly how to pull off these attacks. Okay, we are going to be working through our final path traversal before we look at how to do this with the automated tool. And so you can go ahead and open up this lab, and in here we can read our instructions and exactly how to pull this off. And so we're told that this has URL decode in it. And so this is actually very similar to a exploit that was pulled off. And I came across this not too long ago when I was looking through path traversals and how they were pulled off on the Hacktivity. And so we have, this was done June 9th, 2018. So quite a while ago, a couple years, but this is going to be pretty much the exact same exploit we're going to be doing in this lab. So just to show you that these labs aren't just theoretical, but they actually do help you perform these exploits. And so you can see here, this is the URL encoding. And so a simple way to look at URL encoding is you can come over here to the decoder, you can type in some gibberish, and then you can encode it as URL, and you will see the URL encoding pull down here. And so what we are going to be doing is doing something very similar to what this guy has done here. And you can actually see he actually pastes, it pulls down the file that he should not have access to. So what we are going to do is come in here, you open up the lab, click access the lab, same as we've been doing the last few lessons. We'll open up Burp, turn on the intercept, and we will view details of one of the files. We will look for the GET request with the image file name, send it to repeater. And now what we're going to do is very similar to what we just saw. So we'll start out just like normal. You can go ahead and send this, and then we are going to type in the URL encoded version, because it's going to decode it for us, which is %252F, and that should pull it down for us. And we'll go ahead and delete that because it's encoded in there. And so we can send that. I'm going to do, rather than type this, is I'm going to go ahead and copy it and then paste it, and then send it, and then paste it, and then send. And there we found the file. And so you can actually really easily see how this is very practical. Here we're practicing it. Here someone actually pulled it off on a live website. And so if we come in here and we turn our proxy off, we should solve the lab. And so in the next lesson, you are going to be required to open up Juice Shop, because this is the URL we're going to be using to pull off the attack on our automated tool. So you can go ahead and open up Juice Shop and get it running. Okay, we are going to be looking at the automated way to find directory traversal exploits. And so you can go ahead and open up a terminal and have Juice Shop open and running. And just to make sure you have the tool installed, you can come down to your terminal and you can type in sudo apt-get install. It should look exactly like this. And then you will hit enter. It will require your password, and you can go ahead and type that in, and it will run, and it might ask you, are you sure you want to install? And you can press Y and then hit enter or return if you're on a Mac, and it will install. And so the way to run this tool is very, very simple. You would just type in .pwn, and then we will give it the parameters that we want it to follow. So we'll just type in .pwn, and then we will go -m. And this is, I actually already ran it just to make sure it would run on our local server. And so this is what you will type in. You will type in .pwn, and then you'll flag m, HTTP, and then you'll flag h, and it's our local host. And so I actually just came up here and copied and pasted the page I was on. And when you hit run, it will run for us. Oh, it did not run for us because we have to run it as sudo, as our super user. And now it is running, and it'll ask us, press enter to start the testing, and then we'll go ahead and hit enter. And now you can see, look, it is running all of those for us with the ///, and then it encodes it, and it just runs through, and it tells us even where it's vulnerable. Now this web application is vulnerable, I think it's vulnerable to all of them. They did not do a good job when building the web application for making it secure to this attack. And it will run, and there are hundreds of different ways to send. There's the one we just saw with the %252f, and it runs it for you, and it'll tell you. For us, it would have been right here. We would have had 3 paths to go back before it goes forward into the Etsy password. And so it would have found it right here. It would have flagged it as vulnerable. So now you can see just how easy it is to run this with this tool. And you can go ahead and hit Command C to close out of it so that it'll stop running. And it might have actually went ahead and solved a challenge for you. If it didn't, you can go ahead and type in //// really any of these, because it says it's vulnerable to them, and then type in etc/password, and it should pull down. I think I already solved the challenge. It should pull down that we have accessed a file that you should not have had access to, and so that will solve that challenge for you. It's pretty simple. Running this tool is really easy, and it takes a lot of the manual testing that we just did out of account for us, and it will run hundreds of different ways to find a path traversal. Okay, we're going to start by looking at the XML injection at this point, and we're going to start a really easy XML injection. This is one that you're going to see that's probably the most common, and then from here we're going to look at some more uncommon XML injection methods, but they're going to be a lot more severe. And so this first one is really simple. You can go ahead and open up this lab on Portswigger right here. And I want to walk you through, we'll go ahead and click Access Lab. I want to walk you through what is happening. So when we look at this XML injection, I want to focus just on these 2 lines. When you see this XXE right here, we can change this to be anything we want, and we see it down here. It is the same thing. This is the XXE being called and telling the XML file that we want it to do something right here. So we're going to tell the system to open up the Etsy passwd file. And so I will show you what this looks like. When you come up here and you click View Detail, we will need to turn on burp and forward this to repeater, and we can now turn this off. And we're going to need this right here, so we can copy, and we'll paste it in right here at the top. And now we're going to delete this first part right here, and we're going to change, we can leave our, I guess we'll leave our doc type as foo, and we're going to change this right here to Etsy, and this right here to pass WD. And then down here where it says the product ID, what we're going to do is we want to call this right here to tell the system we want it to do something. So if you remember what this looked like over here, we have the and XXE with the colon, we need burp, and where that product ID was, we can paste this in. And now we'll send it and see if we have any errors, and we do not. And it provides for us the Etsy passwd file. This is a pretty big vulnerability. This is something you shouldn't be able to look at. This is something you shouldn't be able to look at, and it will give us users that are on the system. So from here, we're going to move on to TryHackMe, and we have a Juice Shop, which is a really great place to practice a lot of web application vulnerabilities. And we will hop over here and pop open a machine, and I'll show you a file upload XML injection. We'll come over to OWASP Juice Shop. You will need to click on login and create an account. So I'm going to create an account, and then we'll be back at the home page, and I'll show you where to start from there. Okay, so we are all logged in, and we are now at the front page. We'll come up here to the 3 lines. We're going to say we want to file a complaint, and we'll just say a bunch of gibberish. And now we're going to need to upload a file. So we will create our XML file by coming over here and gedit, and this is what we'll just name our file so that way we know what it is. I'm going to make this on my desktop so that it's easy to find. And now we need our code to inject with. So we'll copy this. We can move it over here to our file, and then we'll just change this to Etsy pass WD and save it, close it, and come back over here to Juice Shop and click browse. We go to our desktop. We want all files, XXE, open. We need burp to intercept this, so we'll come back to our proxy, intercept, and submit. Send this to repeater. I actually don't remember which one this is, so we're going to send a couple of them. We'll send this, and we'll just turn repeater off and hope we got it. So it says we've solved several of the challenges. We'll come to repeater. We'll go back here to the first one. We'll send it, and right here is the passwd file. It doesn't come back in quite as nice a format as our original one that we had done on Portswigger here, but we have the XML injection worked, and we have the passwd file, and here's the root user. So this is a file upload XML injection, and now we're going to cover a XML injection that's going to lead us to remote code execution. And you can actually see right here, they tell us remote code execution. If we are lucky and the PHP accept module is loaded, we can get remote code execution. And we're going to go ahead and try this, but this is on HackTheBox. And if you don't have a subscription to HackTheBox, that's okay. This would be something I have never seen outside of HackTheBox, but it's something to be aware of. So we'll go ahead and I'll open up HackTheBox, launch the box, and get all set up, and then I'll walk you through an XML injection with HackTheBox. All right, I have popped open here for us the HackTheBox machine. This is the landing page, and if you run a Dirtbuster or FUF, you will find this db.php, and then we have the portal.php, and we click this, and we are brought to this page. Now, if we go to test it, grab our interceptor, and we just put something in here, and we send it. We'll send this to repeater, turn this off, send, and we have this value right here, data, and this is what we get back. We have this data parameter right here. We can copy it, come to our decoder, and we can decode as URL, decode as base64, and we see we have this XML. We get an XML return that has been base64 encoded and then URL encoded. And so what we can do with this is try and add to it or adjust it and see if we can pull off an XXE attack by just reversing this. We can add in our own payload, and then we can encode it as base64, then URL encode it and put it back into the repeater tab right here. So what we'll do is come over and we'll just try to pull down the etc passwd file first. Okay, one other way to look at this that is a lot easier, rather than just coming into the decoder and decoding this as URL and then base64 to get to the XML file, is we can go to our repeater, and remember we have this data here. We can come over to our inspector, and then we can click this little arrow right here, and it will automatically decode this for us, and we will land right here, and we can actually do our changes right here, apply changes, and resend this and get our our response brought back to us. So what we will do is come over, we'll go to OWASP, and we will grab the XML right here, the XXE. We'll open this up to grab our payload. This is not the one we were in earlier, but that is okay. So what we will grab is the doc type and the file system, and we'll stop right here. We can copy this. We'll put this on a new line right here. We'll actually try to see if this will let us put this all on one line so that it looks better for us. Now that we have this on, well, not one line, but it's a little better. Here we go. There we go. Now it's on one line. So what we're going to do is similar to what we've been doing before, is we can just leave this however we want. We're actually going to delete this. We don't really need that, and it looks a little better for us. This goes on a different line. Guess we'll leave it. Okay, so here we go. What we can do at this point is type in etc/passwd, and then down here we need to call the XXE. So we can go our and symbol, XXE, and our semicolon, and apply changes. And if we send this response, you can see right here we have the passwd file brought down for us. And so one of the things we always should look at, especially when we are on a hack the box, some kind of CTF, or even a pen test or a bug bounty program, you really wouldn't do this, but you would look for the users, because you may be able to attack some of them. So we have the development user, here's the user ID, we have root obviously up here, and what you can do is just look for the ones that have bin bash, and those are the ones that will have a shell available on them. So we have development and root, and a quick look, I'm not really seeing any others. And now what we can do is try to pull down that db.php file, but in order to do that you will have to use a PHP wrapper, and those are something I would suggest learning, because you will see them every now and then whenever you see a PHP system running. A lot of times you can think PHP wrapper and see if you can pull down information that you should not be able to. And there's a lot of different places you can use those PHP wrappers, but one of those places is going to be right here. So instead of pulling down a file, what we're going to do is we're going to type in here PHP, and we can delete all of this and type in filter/convert.base64-encode/resource equals, and instead of the etc passwd file, what we're going to be looking for is the db.php, and you can find this typically if you're familiar with doing CTFs or any kind of pen testing, you will know that you can find the files for a web application inside of var/www/html/db.php, and this is pretty standard for where you're going to find files on a Linux system. And we can apply changes. We can copy this. We can go to the decoder, paste this in, and as we decode it with base64, it tells us that we have this in our response. So this would be what was brought back with our PHP filter, and we have a username right here. We have the database name. We have a password right here, and we should be able to SSH in as the development user using this password right here, because we know it's really common for people to reuse their passwords, and this will actually lead to remote code execution. So if we come over here and we say SSH, and then we say make sure we had that user right. I think it was development at 10, 10, 11, 100. We might have to grab that user again. We'll say yes, and come over to the decoder, grab the password, and paste that in, and it worked. So this is how you can get remote code execution on the box on a server using XXE. And so with that, this one was really complex, but XML injection is something you should look into and try to learn. I would suggest going back to Portswigger and maybe practicing a few of their XXE challenges as well as Juice Shop, and just play around with it until you feel like you are comfortable and you understand what is going on. So there are 3 different ways that you can use XXE in the cybersecurity testing world. Okay, one of the most common vulnerabilities is going to be cross-site scripting, or it's also known as XSS. And this vulnerability is common, but it's also going to be pretty hard to exploit without knowing some form of HTML and JavaScript. So there are basic payloads that you can go in and you can just test a bunch of them. And I'm going to show you a list that I found. It's got over 6,500 different ways to try and exploit this, but most of the time you're going to have to inspect the page and modify the content. But we'll get to that in just a little bit. I'm going to show you just a couple of cross-site scripting examples here, and then I kind of want to show you the code of what's going on. I think you'll be able to understand it even if you know zero programming. So with that, we'll go ahead and I'll show you an example of what cross-site scripting is, and then I'll explain why it's so dangerous. And so this is going to be the most basic, simple form of cross-site scripting. And so all we want to do is have an alert pop up. And if you can pop up an alert on a bug bounty program, you will be able to submit that for a vulnerability. And there you'll see them a lot of places. A lot of people like to look for them. I don't really look for them all that often because I think most people look for these, and if it's not stored cross-site scripting, then you're not really going to get paid for the amount of time that you put in. You'll get paid, but just not enough for the amount of time it's going to take to find them. So we're going to do this with an image. An image tag, so we'll go image source equals, and then we leave it blank. And when this is blank, it's going to make an error on the page. And so on error, we want to alert, which is going to give us the ability to pull off the cross-site scripting. And we're just going to alert 1, and then we will close the tag. And I have made a mistake somewhere. Let's go ahead and delete this equal sign. There it is. So we have the alert pop up and it says localhost 1. Now what you can do with a cross-site scripting and why it's so dangerous is not because you can just pop things up on somebody's screen, but what you're able to do is you could make this look really fancy, and you could say log into a Wi-Fi or log into this page, or you were accidentally logged out, and people can type in their username and their password, and then all of a sudden you have their credentials. You can put alert document.cookie right here, and then all of a sudden you can steal their session. And so there's quite a few different ways that you can use this to get malicious with it. And so that's why it's so dangerous, but it's also really common. It's going to be in the top 10 vulnerabilities that you're going to find on pretty much any list. And so right here is a different version. So right here is just plain as can be. You can type whatever you want and nothing's going to get blacklisted. So right here, I have made a little, it's really short, it only has the image tag, but you can type your script. The image has been blacklisted. So what I mean by that is if you watch what happens, I finish typing image and it automatically deletes it. This will happen on programs that you're going to test. So they'll have characters that are blacklisted. I come across it regularly. I have come across blacklisted characters when I was trying to do a SQL injection. So you'll come across blacklisted characters. What you'll do is you can go out and you can find encoders and you can encode your payloads in order to fit your specific needs. And in this case, it's pretty simple. All you have to do is go I and make a capital M and a G, and it doesn't get deleted. Or you could go capital I, M, G. And this is a way that you'll find, especially on Capture the Flags, to bypass blacklisted characters or words. Is you just change it a little bit, or you can encode it and you can bypass the filter. And so we could do the exact same thing that we had done before. So we'll go on error equal alert, and then we'll just do alert 1, and then we'll close it off. And there's the alert. So all we really had to do was just change the image tag, because the image had been blacklisted, but we were allowed to pull up a different version of the image tag. And so what this looks like, here we have banned characters. So you can have banned characters such as these. People will ban these characters so that you can't inject your code into it. But I will show you. So in this case, I actually ban this character, the backslash. So no matter how many times I push it, it's not going to come in. But you can still ban this. You will find the backslash ban, because if you can't close a tag, then it's going to be really hard to pull off a cross-site scripting. Not impossible, but you can still do it. So what this looks like is I am just replacing the image with an empty string. And over here we have the banned characters. You can see right here, you're not allowed to use those, and I replace them with an empty string. And so this is what a blacklist would look like. You just have a bunch of characters listed that are blacklisted, and you're not allowed to type them in. So when you have a banned backslash, which you're probably only going to see in Capture the Flags, something like this. But what you can do is you can actually make a button tag like this. If I can get that right, there we go. And then you can just type something in here. And then what you can do is you can type in on click equal, and then you do the same thing. You'd put your alert, and we'll put our 1, and we don't have to have a closing tag. We don't have to close that. So we click it, and there's the alert. And you will see this in one of our practice, when we practice the cross-site scriptings. So those are just a few ways you can pull off the cross-site scripting. I want to show you a page that has a ton of cross-site scripting payloads, and here it is. You can actually just Google cross-site scripting payloads, which we'll go ahead and I'll just do it right now and walk you through it. We'll just type in payloads and just click the first one, and here's going to be a list, so you can get an idea of how many are out there and different ways you can do a cross-site scripting. And so this is why I'm telling you there's a lot of different ways to do these. We'll actually see one similar to this in just a few lessons, because we're going to have to close off a tag, and then we're going to have a character blocked, and then we'll actually be able to insert the payload. So there's a ton of different ways to pull these off. It's going to require some knowledge of HTML and JavaScript, or you can, if you're on a capture the flag, you can just go to burp intruder and you can just send this entire list until you are able to receive a solved challenge. But with that, this is a basic introduction into cross-site scripting, and we'll get a little more hands-on, and I'll have you guys start practicing writing your own payloads in the coming lessons. Okay, for this challenge, I want you to come to the HackerOne or the Hacker 101 CTF. This is HackerOne's practice site for us to practice what we've learned. And you can come in here to the easy with 2 flags and click go. If you would like the challenge, we have already saw the XSS in this challenge. I showed it to you in the last lesson. So if you want to go ahead and look for it on your own, you can go ahead and do that. I think you have the knowledge to solve this challenge all on your own without any help, but I will do a walkthrough here in just a second. So if you would like the challenge, you can go ahead and see if you can find the cross-site scripting, and you can do that now. Okay, once we're in here, you can go through, and one of the first things, if you remember from the recon lesson, is to click through and just open up everything in the page and just see what you can find and what you can do. I actually just thought of another way to try and solve this challenge that I might try and see if it works. And then you can come back and you can go back to the home page, you can create a new page, and you can just click through and see what you can find. But in the markdown, they actually give us a clue as to how to solve this challenge. You have this random button here, it doesn't do anything, but if you edit this page, we have the tag for a button. So if you were unable to find this, you can go ahead and try and solve the challenge now. Because if you remember, if we have a button, we can come in here and we can go on click, and then we can put in our alert, and then we can put in 1. And so we have our on click here, and it's closed off, and we should be able to save this. And on our click, we are given the alert. I just thought of, I bet we could copy this. There's another way you could have solved this. If you didn't see this button here, and you didn't have this clue, but you came into the testing and edited, and you saw this, you might have thought to go ahead and just insert your own button, and you could have pulled off the same thing just on a different page. And we'll go ahead and change this to just click, just so you can see it's a different button on a different page, and we could have done the same thing. So that is another way that we're able to pull this off. And we're going to see a couple of more examples. And the reason for this is the cross-site scripting is a rabbit hole that you can go down indefinitely. There are thousands and thousands of different ways to pull this off. And so I just want to show you the basic introduction into cross-site scripting, because without knowing HTML and JavaScript, it's going to be kind of challenging to pull these off. And since this is a beginner course, I'm not really expecting any software developers to be in here wondering how to do a cross-site scripting, because if you're a developer, you're going to already know, because you will have had to write code to defend against it. Okay, we are going to come back to Portswigger, and we're just going to do a few of these just so you get an idea of how cross-site scripting works and how people can attack it, and just a little more understanding of seeing these in context of how they relate to pulling off these vulnerabilities, especially to beginners, as you can just copy and paste some of these into search engines and search bars, and you will see them on HackerOne and the Hacktivity, and just so you understand what's going on. So we'll go ahead and open up this first lab here, and we will be told what we are supposed to do. So we're supposed to call the alert function in order to solve the lab. And this one is going to be one of the most basic cross-site scriptings that we're going to see. And one of the common ways to check to see if a website or a web application has any defense against cross-site scripting in a search bar like this. What you can do is you can come in here, and this is basic JavaScript. So we just type in script, and then we type alert 1, and then we close the script tags. So this is just a basic JavaScript command here. I can type. And so if this has no sanitization, then this should work. And you can try these in search bars. You can try them and post this script to any kind of social media outlet for the web application and see if it pulls back any cross-site scripting. So we'll go ahead and search this, and it says we have timed out because I opened the lab before I started this video. So we'll go ahead and reopen the lab and let that load. And we'll go ahead, and once this is loaded, I will actually just paste that in. Go ahead and paste that in, and we'll search it. And it pulls back the alert. We were able to alert 1, and it says we have solved this challenge. Now in the next challenge, we are going to go over the DOM cross-site scripting, which I actually think is down here, because this is one that we have seen with the inner HTML, this one right here. So if you would like to go ahead and open this up and give it a try and see if you can get this to pull the alert, we have looked at this payload before. It's not new to you. You will have seen it. You can go ahead and try and find it on your own. Okay, so how did you get along with that challenge? So we can actually come in here. This is the lab we're going to be working on. We can open it up, and we're going to be setting what we type in to the inner HTML, which means what we are typing in and searching for is going to be saved on the client side, which means it will try and render it. This is what I set up when we looked at the very first examples on the application that I tried to give you examples. If you go back and look at it, this says dangerously set inner HTML, which is just inner HTML with the React framework. And so this is going to be the exact same type of vulnerability that we have already witnessed at the beginning of this section on cross-site scripting. So you can go ahead and open up the lab, and we'll have our search bar, and we're going to be doing essentially the same thing we did in the beginning, where what we type in is going to be rendered on this page. And so we can type in our image, and then we'll do our source, which is where it's going to look for the source. You can actually type anything in here. And so it's going to look for a file saved in this application with this name, and it's not going to find it. And so that's going to cause an error. And what do we want to do? On error, we want to alert, and then here you would put your proof of concept, because we just want to prove that this works. And you can type in XSS, or you can type in 1, or you can type in whatever you want. And we will go ahead and close that off, and we can search this. And there is the alert for us. And so with that, that solves this lab. And we are going to try one more, and I'm going to show you kind of, this is a little more towards the intermediate level of cross-site scripting, but it's just a way for you to know more about cross-site scripting. And if you come across it and you really think there is a cross-site scripting vulnerability in a website, just how you can work through that and maybe do some more research on your own to try and exploit it. Okay, this next lab is going to be one that is going to give an example of what it looks like to start looking for cross-site scripting in a little more of an intermediate or advanced way. This is going to be probably the most common way that this is going to be found, because you're going to have to inspect the element and know how to break out of the HTML or the string that you're stuck in order to pull off JavaScript and run it within the application. So we're actually going to go ahead and open up this one right here, and it'll be over here. It'll tell us what we need to do, and we just need to break out of the JavaScript string and call the alert function. So I went ahead and opened this up, and the most common way to do something like this is type in something that you can remember what you typed, or something really easy to find. So we'll type in 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'll hit search. And now what we'll do is inspect the element, or you can view page source. We'll actually do that. That'll be a lot easier to see. So we'll view page source, and then we find our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but this is not where we're going to be breaking out of this. See, this is a script tag. The search term right here, we searched for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we have the closing script tag here. So in order to close out of this, we can actually put a script tag up here in our search query, and it will close all this off. This script tag will match this script tag, and then we should be able to open up a new script tag, and it will run in the order. It'll run all of this in the order that it is laid out, and then we should be able to put in our payload. So we'll come back to our lab, and what we should be able to do is close off the previous script tag. So that will close this tag, and everything before it will be inside that tag. And then we should be able to come in here and type in our own payload. And so we'll go script alert, and we will just alert 1, and then we can close off our payload. And look at it, make sure it looks right. And that should work. And then we'll go ahead and search it, and there is the alert, which means we've solved the challenge. And everything after that script tag will get rendered on the page because it doesn't have an opening tag, if you're wondering why this showed up. So we'll go ahead and we'll look at the page source, and I'll show you the difference. See, here is where we closed off that script tag, and then here we put in our payload, and then because this script doesn't have an opening tag, this just gets rendered on the page as plain HTML. So if you are unfamiliar with programming, this probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense to you, but when it comes to cross-site scripting, it's kind of going to be necessary to understand HTML and basic JavaScript in order to pull this off. But the reason I included this in this beginner course is because cross-site scripting is one of the most common vulnerabilities, and so I wanted you to be aware of it, and maybe you can practice it and see if you can get better, or if you want to, before you take the intermediate course, is go learn some basic HTML and some basic JavaScript. It won't take long. You can learn HTML in a week. You can learn CSS, which is how to make a website look pretty, in a very short amount of time, couple of days, and then you can learn basic JavaScript probably in another week. It doesn't take long. It's pretty simple to learn. And so I wanted to show you cross-site scripting. I want you to be aware of it. Like, look at how many cross-site scripting labs exist on Portswigger, and I think they actually have, DOM vulnerabilities, so even more cross-site scripting. So there's a bunch of cross-site scripting. It's really common, but it does take some programming knowledge to solve. And so with that, I will see you in the next video. Hey, thanks for stopping by my channel. In this video, we're going to cover everything I think that you need to know as you are starting your bug bounty journey within the realm of HTML and JavaScript. This is just an introductory course, so if you find this video helpful, please let me know if you'd like me to expand this course into a full HTML and JavaScript course for the purpose of bug bounty hunting and ethical hacking. My goal for you in this course is to come away with the ability to read HTML when you inspect the source code or you view the page source. I want you to be able to understand what's going on, what are all the tags and the links that are within the HTML, and I want you to be able to understand how it all fits together. And so I'm going to walk you through how to actually write some HTML, and then from there we're going to move on to view the CSS and how it organizes and beautifies the HTML. And then after that, I'm going to cover some very basic JavaScript. My goal isn't to teach you how to code in JavaScript, but rather just be able to understand what the JavaScript is doing when you see it. I want you to be able to recognize the variables, the for loops, the while loops, and what exactly the JavaScript is doing when you come across it. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into it. Okay, so here we are at CodePen.io. We're going to be starting out with basic HTML and how to understand it. So you can come over here and go to this web application and click Start Coding, and it will load up for us what we need. You might have a display that looks something like this or this. I like it all the way over here to the right, so that way my actual website will look similar to the way you would see it in an actual browser. So we can come over here and minimize this, and we can minimize this because we're not going to be dealing with CSS or JavaScript just yet. And basic HTML and tags, I want to show how HTML tags look. So HTML, what is HTML? It is the hypertext markup language, and it's the language of the internet. There's also XML, which is another markup language, but we're not going to deal with that just yet because we are on HTML. So when you come to HTML, you can make static websites. They won't look very nice, but you can make them, and you can do this with just HTML. And so let's just start coding along, and you'll be able to understand it as we go. So let's say we're making a journal entry to a book, or we're just making a table of contents. You could start out with just a basic H1, and then you'll make another H1, only you're going to put a forward slash, and we're going to close it out. And then in here we can say this is a title, and then it will render for us over here. And we have this closing tag, and this closing tag is actually really important because let's say I had by me, and as it loads this, it's going to put all of this in here, and it puts it all in big font. And when we close this out, like we already saw and the way you're supposed to do, it will load it differently. You can see the H1 makes the text really big, and let's say we want to enclose this. Actually, we'll enclose the me down here with an H2, just like this, and you can see this has changed right here. And you can see that it is smaller. And if we make this, let's say we want to make this an H4, you can see as the numbers go up, the size of the font gets smaller. So the H1 is for the top heading and everything gets smaller. And then you also have a paragraph tag that looks like this. And in here would be what you would consider a paragraph. So you can just write in here something, and then we can close this out just like this, and you'll be able to see that it renders just the same. And now we have this paragraph tag. So you have headings and paragraphs, and you can format the text and the style with the CSS, which we will do later. But right now, I just want you to have a basic understanding of how HTML works and get to understand and be familiar with these tags. You can actually go to a documentation website for such as W3 Schools. And so for now, I want you to get an understanding of these tags, and you can go to W3 Schools and read the documentation about all the different tags. And we're going to see quite a few different ones as we go along, but these tags become really important for cross-site scripting and other vulnerabilities because we're going to have to learn how to break out of these tags in order to insert our own malicious code in the future. Okay, so now that we are familiar with a closing tag, there are some kinds of tags that do not require a closing tag, and these are typically tags that do not have any input. Like these all take some kind of text that they render on the page. There are some tags that are self-closing, such as a break tag, and this tag does not take any text or input, and what it does is it spaces out these gaps right here. And there is also another tag called an HR tag, and this will place a line underneath of the text. This is usually done in like basic resume style HTML websites. You won't really see a whole lot of this in actual web applications. And if you do, usually stuff like this is done with a border inside of CSS in a div. But this is something to be aware of, that there are self-closing tags within HTML, and you will probably see these. I want you to be familiar with all the different kinds of tags you are going to be seeing when you're looking through source code and you're looking for vulnerabilities, as well as trying to figure out how to get a cross-site scripting to work. And it is always helpful to be familiar with the tags because some tags may be blacklisted while others are not, and they can be helpful in helping you break out of an HTML element in order to get a cross-site scripting to work. And another thing to be aware of, if you see something like we just saw with the HR and we see this pop up on the screen and we decide we want to add a size to it and we want to make it bigger or smaller, and you can see this is running in pixels, so if we do 39, that's going to be really big. I meant to make it just 9. You can see that our line shows up, and I think you can also add a shadow, but I don't remember how to do that with an HR tag. If you ever see this and you're wondering, wow, I really like how this looks, I would like to be able to make a tag that looks just like this one on a web application. You can inspect and you can actually just look to see exactly where it is at. Let me see if I can. We'll grab this, inspect, and right here you see the HR size 3. And it's really important to be familiar with inspecting specific things because it's possible in the future that you're going to have an input field and you are able to search. It renders within the HTML, and you're going to need to be able to inspect to see where the word is within the HTML so that you know exactly what you need to do in order to break out of it to get your malicious code to run. We'll get more into that in the future, but for now, let's continue with HTML and what it looks like and becoming more familiar with it. We're going to move on from here, and we're actually going to install a text editor. I'm going to have you install Visual Studio Code if you're new, or you can use whatever text editor you would like, but I'm going to be using VS Code. So what we can do is come over here and we can just type in VS Code just like this, and you will come to this page right here. You can click download, and you can download it for whatever OS system you are using, and you can go ahead and download it and then install it. It's pretty simple to install and open up. And when you're here, you will want to make a new folder. I'm just going to leave it. We can barely see my folder over here. I'm going to rename it as test app. You can call yours whatever you would like, and then we're going to open it up. So we'll come over here, click open, go to desktops, and I named it test app right here. And I can open this, and it will open over here just like this, and we can open up a new file and say index.html, and when we hit enter, it's going to open up our index.html. Because we're in VS Code, right here's where you go to install plugins. I'm just going to have you install one plugin right now, and we're going to type in boilerplate. I think you could just type in boil, yes, and it goes ahead and opens this up. We want HTML boilerplate, and you'll hit install right here. I already have it installed. And then when we come back to our index.html, if we just type in HTML, we can go down to this 5 right here and hit enter, and we'll be given the boilerplate. And now you can delete this right here. This is how we want to keep this, so we can save this right here. And a helpful tip to render what we have going on in a browser, we can just right click and we can just say we want to open with Google Chrome, and it will open up a page for us like this. I actually want to put this page over here so you can see it. And if we just come over to our body right here and we just type in, and let's make it in H1, and we'll just say hello world, save this. And if we come over here and refresh our page, it will render for us our hello world. So now that we know everything is working, we're going to begin looking at a little more in-depth advanced HTML that we will need to know in order to break out of our HTML to perform cross-site scripting and insert JavaScript. So with that, I'll see you in the next video. All right, so we have our own little web application running over here, and now we're going to enter a little bit in here. So instead of this H1, we can enter our name, and we'll make like an entry that we would see into something kind of like a Wikipedia page. So you have a name, and then you're gonna want a title, and the title is gonna be what goes on up here, like create a plan or a React app. We're gonna go ahead and name it, and this actually goes inside the head tag. And so we can open this up, title. I guess I probably shouldn't open that up, because if I close it off, I think it'll automatically close it for me. And we can say Ryan's site, and then we'll save it. And then if you come over here and refresh this, it should refresh for us. We got your site and your name, and you can add in a paragraph tag. So we can say, what do we want to say about ourselves right here inside this paragraph, and we can say, I am learning to become a hacker. So this is true for all of us here, and maybe we want to make this hacker right here, we want it to be italicized and bold. So we can come in here and we can say we want all of this to be emphasized, and it closes that off there for us. And we'll paste it over here, and we'll save this. And maybe we want the word hacker to be bold, so we can come in here and say we want this to be strong. And we can move this as well. And now if we save this and refresh our page over here, it has all become italicized. I'm not sure why this didn't become bold for me. I believe that's supposed to be bold, but that's okay if it doesn't work for us. My goal right now is for you to be understanding that there are different tags, and we can actually add in a break tag. Like say we decide we want this word hacker right here to be on the next line. We can add in a break, and we can refresh it, and now we have it on the next line. And maybe we decide after this that we want a line underneath everything, and so we'll say we want the HR in here for the line break, and if we refresh this, we now have our line. So we're starting to get a entry form here, kind of like a Wikipedia page. I actually should look at a Wikipedia page so I know what they actually look like. But anyway, my goal for us is to begin to understand these tags, and we're going to look at a few more tags, and then we're going to start looking at what goes inside these tags, because sometimes you'll be inside of something that looks like this, and you're going to have to figure out how to break out of this tag, because your entry input will be saved inside of a source or inside of something within a tag. And so we're going to learn more about inputs over here in just a little bit. For now, we're going to look at a few more tags that are going to be really common and you're going to see a lot when you look at page source. Now that I'm about to close this out, I actually see that I spelled the word strong wrong here. So if we save that and now we come over here and we refresh our page, it becomes bold for us there. So inside of our HTML and our tags, we will need to spell things correctly. Otherwise, the interpreter will not know what we're doing or how to translate it into the web page. Okay, with that, I will see you in the next video. Now I want us to look at lists, and in the next video we're going to look at image tags, which are going to be really important because they're a main way to get an XSS to work, and so those will be coming up. But for now, we have our little web app that looks like this, and underneath the HR we're going to add in a list, and the way to add in a list can be done with a UL, and you just add in an LI like this. And now we're going to type into our list, and we're going to go ahead and put in I have learned about tags. And in our next one, dang it, in the Python text editor, you can hit tab and it'll go past your tag for you, and then you can go down to the next line. So we'll add another list just like this, and we're going to say I have learned about lists, and then we can say lastly, next I will learn about image tags. And now if we save this, come over to our page and refresh it, we have these bullet points just like this. And if we wanted them to be numbers, it's pretty simple. You just would change this to an OL like so, and I forgot to save it, and now we can refresh the page and we have 1, 2, 3. So these are lists and tags. You'll see these sometimes. You'll be able to have inputs, and one of the really popular places to see something like this is inside of some kind of task manager or something. You will see these in live programs or maybe in a penetration test, where you're testing some kind of application that is supposed to help you schedule, and you'll be able to input lists and things like this. And maybe there will be some way for you to inject either over here or over here, but these are the LI tags and this is the OL. So when you see these in a page source, you now know what is going to be going on. Now we're going to move on to the image tag, and we're going to pop our first cross-site scripting, only we're going to use an alert because we're not going to be injecting it into anything. But I want you to see how it works, because you're going to see these image cross-site scriptings a lot in the future. They are really popular if you can get one to store, for the cross-site scripting to pop every single time the page loads. So with that, we will move on in the next video. A few more things to go over and learn before we are ready to start practicing cross-site scripting elsewhere. And the first thing we need to cover is an image tag. The image tag is going to be one that you're going to see a lot in CTFs and practicing cross-site scripting, because it will automatically render on the page whenever it is loaded, or if there's some kind of submit button for an on error to cause an event. So with that, we will just start out with a basic understanding of inserting an image. So if you just type in IMG, it should load for you. You have this alt, which is what's going to load if the source doesn't work. So we can just say Ryan, because I'm going to use my image, and if we save this, and we'll say the source is lost, so obviously there's not going to be any source. If we come over here and we refresh the page, we see Ryan, and it tells us the little image is not found. But if we go out to, say, Google and we type in who am I, and we type in PhD security, and then we go to images, here I am right here, and we can copy the image address right here. Make sure I'm trying to read those, make sure that's right. And if we paste this in here and then we save this huge link, when we refresh our page, our little browser that we have created right here is going to go out to this linked address that we have right here on YouTube to grab my image, and it's going to ping it and make sure that we have permission to load this image right here. So if we save this and refresh, you can see my image has popped up right there. Now I don't like where this is at, so I'm going to delete this, and that's one way to grab an image, and you will probably see that in the future, and you'll definitely see when images aren't loaded. That's usually what's happening. Now I already got the photo over here, same photo. You will see this as well. This is the most common way to load an image, and it's also the most reliable way. I actually want to put it underneath my name because it'll look better in our little wiki page right here. So if we do our same thing and we say image, and the source is just ryan.png because it is already loaded right here for us, and we save it, we can put in the alt, would just say my name, and we save it and we refresh it. You see it moves up here, and that is because it's grabbing the link right here. Now I think the most popular way to perform a cross-site scripting, especially in CTFs that don't have any kind of blacklisting, is going to look just like this. Source, you just put some mumbo jumbo in there, that's not going to work. And then an alt, doesn't really matter. What you're going to see is an on error, and then it's going to do something, and usually the do something is going to be alert and 1, and then save this, refresh our page, and you see the cross-site scripting pops right there for us. And you'll see something like, sometimes people will put in a 1, sometimes people will put in XSS, and sometimes you can just see a 1 2 3, save it. We got too many closing brackets, and on our page over here, refresh, we see this page says 1 2 3, and that is going to be probably the most common cross-site scripting that you're going to see in beginner CTFs. And the reason you're going to see it done like that in the beginning is because this is really easy and your input isn't being stored anywhere. We're going to get a little more complicated as we go along with the cross-site scripting. This is how you're going to see images loaded in HTML, and this is how you're going to see a lot of cross-site scriptings performed. You're going to see this image payload all over the place. So if we come back to our payloads, look, we have image, 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 and you always see this on error, and here's an on click. And you're just going to see a lot of these image tags. Here's another image tag. And so you're going to want to be familiar with understanding the image tag and then how to perform the cross-site scripting with it. As we go along, things are going to get more interesting and a lot more fun to try and break out of. I know cross-site scripting doesn't pay a lot of money usually, but it is a lot of fun to break out of the HTML tags and bypass the bad characters. So with that, we're going to look at hrefs and hyperlinks in the next section, and then we're going to start looking at getting cross-site scripting to work for us. And then after that, we're going to start looking at cross-site scripting and breaking out of HTML tags. So with that, I will see you in the next video. Okay, so we're here with our code for our very simple website that we have going on right here. And so far we have just a static website with nothing really going on. And I want to move on into hrefs, and we're going to build this inside of an anchor tag. So right now, if we refresh this page right here, we're going to get our XSS. So we're going to go ahead and comment this out. I think you can just click at the end of the line. Yes, you can. You can click at the end of the line, and on a Mac you hit command / or command ? And it comments out the line there for us. And below this, we're going to add in our anchor tag, which is just going to make us have a clickable link. So we're going to go href, which this is going to be the link that we are actually wanting to add to our website. And we're going to just give something very basic like google.com. So we can go https / and then we go www.google.com. And if we save this and then we come over here and refresh, you will see our link when we add it in over here, Google. I forgot to add that text in, and I forgot to save it. So we'll save it, refresh our page, and now we have this link right here. And if we open link in new tab, we are taken to Google. So this is Really simple, and you can I've actually been seeing these little anchor tags also inside of the source right here become a place for cross-site scripting. I'm not really sure why developers have been making it so your user input, say there's like an input box, or you can just come up here and you would do something like this and just add in a parameter of something equals and then XSS or script right here. I've been seeing at least twice in the last month that right there, that XSS would get stored either right here or right here, and all we have to do is break out of these little links or the source or the href in order to get our cross-site scripting to work. So we'll just pretend for now rather than actually build an input, because that's going to require some JavaScript in order to get it to be saved inside of this link. But one of the things you should always do and always check for is if you can add in a parameter right here like this, or you're able to just insert something into like a text field and hit search, like on a search bar on Amazon or Google, and then you inspect the text like this. You should always check to see if your information is getting stored in here, like this cross-site scripting. You should always come in here and look for the cross-site scripting or your keyword that you were able to put into the input. So I want to just show you like how to break out of this for cross-site scripting. Let's say we're able to add a parameter and it adds it into this google.com. The most recent one that I saw, it was actually appending what I put in as a parameter down inside of a page one. It was like something like this, page one equals, and this was at the foot of the application, so it would have looked something like this right here. And if we save this, comment that out, and then we come back over here and we refresh this, it was down here at the bottom and it was like page one, and within this page one it had my little cross-site scripting payload that I was adding in right here. And so we'll pretend that is what we have going on, is that we're able to add in a parameter and it's getting stored right here, and we need to break out of this in order to get our cross-site scripting to work. Because if you just come in here and type in script alert and then you close this out, nothing is going to happen. And I'll show you, we might even get an error. We come over here, we refresh it, and nothing happens. You click on it, nothing happens. We're not able to, because what's going on right now is we're not breaking out of the current HTML. And there's a couple of different ways to go about this, and this is all going to be trial and error. And sometimes when I come across something like this in the wild, I'll just copy this and I will paste it into a text editor just like this, because the colors are going to change when the payload is ready to work. So you should be aware of copying this and bring it into a code sandbox or some kind of text editor to play around with it. But I think this one is going to be pretty easy to break out of. You just add in some quotations right here in order to close this out, and then you can add a closing tag. And now if we save this and we come over here and we refresh the page, we get our cross-site scripting to work. And they really are this easy to find in the wild, especially if you're off the beaten path where payloads have not been tested and people haven't been looking for cross-site scriptings like this. The one that I found really was this simple. All I had to do was come up here into the URL and I just added in a random parameter. So you can just add in, for the sake of example, a CB, like a cache buster, even though we're not doing web cache poisoning. And then you can just add in a parameter of payload, and then we would say equals. And the way you would get this to store is you would type in our script that we put in just like this in order to close off this anchor tag. And then we just add in our payload. And so you'd go like this and you'd say script, spell it right, script, and then we would have alert, and then we would close off our payload just like this. And then you submit this. This is how it worked for me, and this right here was getting stored inside of the href just like this. So that is one way to pull off a cross-site scripting inside of a anchor tag. And sometimes you'll see these inside of something like this, because if you're familiar with Burp and you see the header tags and it sends a refer header showing where you came from in order to get to the next page, it'll have in the previous website that you've come from. And I actually came across a website that was storing the previous URL inside the HTML in a hidden input field, and all I had to do was copy it and then basically do the exact same thing we were doing earlier and just add in our script just like this in order to get the alert to work. So you can look out for these in a lot of different places, such as an href or inside of a source. And just be aware that where you put things within the input may get stored randomly within the HTML, and then all you have to do is be familiar with HTML, such as closing off the quotes and then closing off the tag and then pulling off the cross-site scripting. So with that, we're going to move on and look at some more HTML in the next video. All right, so there's two things I really want to show you before we move on from HTML, and we take just a second to look at CSS, and then we move into JavaScript, and that is hidden information as well as forms. And so we'll just start out with forms, and it will naturally lead into the hidden elements. So a form is pretty much just what it sounds like. It is one of those things that usually includes inputs and information that you're going to be taking in from the user. So usually within a form, you'll have a class, which we're actually not going to mess with until we get to the CSS, and then you'll have some kind of action typically, and this is going to take you somewhere, and we're not going to mess with that really either. And then we're going to also see a method, which we're not going to mess with as well. This is what would be sending the information to the server. Okay, and now we're going to want to add in a label just like this. And inside of this label, we're going to delete that, and we're just going to say your name. So we have this your name right here. So if we save it and we come over to our page and refresh, you will see it pop up on our page. And I added in this little HR so that you could see the division of the information. And right here is the your name. So we have our label, and now we want to take an input. So what we will do is add in an input. So we just say input just like this, and it's going to be a type text, and we're not going to mess with the ID or the name at this point. And if we save this, you're going to see just a box appear over here. And so it says your name, and then we have this text box. We're going to end up adding a button as well. So we will say we want a button, and it's just going to say submit, even though our button at this point is not going to do anything. And we can save this and refresh, and now we have your name with this text box and a submit button that does nothing. And then lastly, you're going to see within these forms is a password, and you're going to see something like another input just like this, and instead of the type text, you're going to see a password. And if you save this and we come back over to our page and we look at this, actually we're going to go ahead and add in a break because we want this on a new line. So we save this, we refresh it, and that's pretty ugly. And you'll see we have these little hidden dots just like here. This is to secure the password, and you'll see these a lot on web applications, but now they've started adding in this little eye over here for you to be able to see what you're typing in, because if you know any HTML and CSS at all, you know that you can just right click this and you can inspect, and then you can come in here and just change this password to text and then look at it just like this, and you can see the information that is being typed in here. And this is why people, when they use public computers, should never save their password, because if you use a public computer and you log in and you accidentally hit save password, then the next user can come in here and repopulate the password and look at your email and password and have your information, which would be very bad. So don't use public computers to enter in literally any of your data that is important to you. So there's one more thing I want to show you, and that is the hidden option. And so we're going to actually use a div here, and I want to show you that you can just type in hidden right here, and usually this hidden will be something other than the actual word hidden. There's other ways to hide elements within HTML, but we're going to use hidden because it's really simple. And then sometimes you'll see something like ID equals 8. And then if we save this, I've never actually seen this in the wild, only in CTFs. So this is not going to be something you're probably going to encounter in the wild, but you will probably see it in CTFs, as I've seen it in several CTFs. And you come over here and you refresh this page, you can see that we have this div ID 8 and it's hidden. And we can unhide this by just deleting the word hidden, and now the ID shows up on the actual page. And usually within CTFs, this ID 8 will be within a form, and you would just change this 8 to something else. So you could come down here and say, we're going to change the ID to 1, which would typically be an admin, and then you would hit the submit form and it would change your ID to 1. That's usually how it'll work in CTFs. I've never actually seen this in the wild, but it is something to be aware of, that you can change this hidden to anything. You can just delete it, and then you can change things within forms that have been hidden quite simply just by changing it. So that is something else to be aware of within the world of HTML and CSS. All right, so we have a future edit here, and I just want to say the reason that this would work in most CTFs is because if there is no JavaScript to check the user ID input, then when you hit the submit button, it would go ahead and send it. But in most cases, there's going to be JavaScript to check such functions. So a lot of times this is not going to work, and we will cover this more in the future. But for now, I have seen this in CTFs where you can change an ID because there's no JavaScript checking to make sure that the user client side input is what it is supposed to be. In the next video, we're going to give just a quick look at